where is this going? What is going to come of this? I had just finished my master's degree at a prestigious university. I was ready to make some big money. I had this opportunity to work for a private practice and eventually take over that private practice. But Melanie was unhappy. We had just had kids. We were far from home. For the past 2 years, I've been working 2 jobs, going to school full time, long hours on internships, in addition to the 2 jobs, full course, full thesis. I had agreed to move back once I graduated. I procrastinated. If anybody knows Melanie, she does not deal with my procrastination very well. When I procrastinate, she takes over. She took over. She moved back. The plan was that I would continue working while she moved back to find a job, and once she found a job, I would move back. Seems like a really good plan. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is we weren't communicating, and I moved back, and I was really unhappy. I was looking for that great life. I was thinking all of that studying and the time that I spent was finally going to pay off, and I was going to make money, and I was going to sit in an office and counsel people, and I was looking for that great life. I was ready. I was set. Everything was laid out, and now I was in North Carolina, having to drive an hour to Virginia to go to work, and I was doing case management. I have a master's and I'm doing case management. That was horrible. I became depressed, resentful, angry, passive aggressive. After a year, Melanie sat down with me as I was sulking on the couch, and the divorce word came up. Where is this going? What's going to come out of this? That was my moment. That was the lower story on how I saw it in that moment. That was my lower story and how I saw it. But there was this upper story. There was this upper story planning out, and this is God's plan. How God was going to use my lower story to accomplish His upper story wasn't really seen for a long time, until I slowed down and I started getting back in a relationship with Him. In hindsight, I see the move as the best thing that's ever happened to me. Do not tell Melanie that. I've told her, but I sugarcoated it just a little bit so it wouldn't go that great. I was getting away from God. I was successful. I was very knowledgeable in theology. My degree was pastoral counseling. Part of that's theology. I could tell you the history of God. But I didn't have a relationship. I didn't have a personal relationship with God that whole time. We never went to church. We came up with all kinds of excuses. But we never went to church. So even though I was growing in knowledge and knowledge of my own spirituality and my own relationship with God, I really didn't have a personal relationship with God. I would have had a lot of money, but would I have really been happy? Those of you who know me, would I be happy sitting in an office every day hearing the problems of other people every day, day in and day out. That's not how I'm a counselor. It's not how I would have been happy. My lower story did not seem to make sense. My lower story did not seem to make sense until it came into contact with God's lower story, God's plan for my life. Then I could see why I was going through what I was going through. Once I came into contact with God's upper story, I could see that. In Genesis, we've been looking at Joseph, and Joseph had to be asking the same questions. Where is this going? What's going to come out of this? His life, his family problems. He was thrown in a pit, sold in slavery, lost a coat. What's going to come out of this? Tempted and tricked by his master's wife, thrown in a pit, put in prison, lost a coat. What's going to come out of that? Always doing right, always remembering God, always losing a coat and being thrown in a pit. What's going to come of this? Where is this going? Then in chapter 40, Joseph gets this big break. He's in prison. He's once again put in charge of everything that is around him. And he gets this big break. The chief cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker and cupbearer are both in prison, and they both have a dream. This is Joseph. Joseph created dreams. Joseph, this is a big break. He interprets the cupbearer and the baker's dream. The cupbearer is great. He's restored to his position. Joseph's only request, and here's his big break, just remember me. When you're serving the cup to Pharaoh, remember me and mention my name. I'm the one that helped you out. Just mention my name. Chapter 40 ends. The cupbearer forgot Joseph. Did not remember him. Where is this going? What's going to come out of this? God has been with him. Joseph understands that his success is God's doing. Joseph understands this. Joseph had to be thinking, God was with me in slavery. God was with me in the prison. The interpreting of these dreams of these very important people had to be God's doing. God had to bring these people into his life so that he can interpret the dream and get out of prison. It had to be by God. So as he sat there and waited and waited and waited for his request to remember me, he had to be asking, where is this going? What's going to come of this? He just had to be asking those things. That's Joseph's lower story. That's his lower story. Always doing right, always losing a coat, always being put in a pit. Forgotten. But watch. What happens is God's upper story is revealed to Joseph's lower story. Chapter 41. We're going to pretty much read the whole chapter of 41. Just skip a few things, but 41. Turn to Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 through 7. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and skinny or gnarled, came out of the Nile and stood beside them by the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly ate up the sleek cows, the fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again in a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. Again, it was a dream. This is a good thing. We're in dream realm. This is Joseph's area of expertise. He's had dreams. He's interpreted the dreams. Pharaoh, of course, didn't know anything about Pharaoh or anything about Joseph. So he asked for his wise men. He asked for his magicians, his soothsayers, all of those things that a Pharaoh would go to interpret a dream. None of them had any clue what these dreams meant. Then after 2 years, the cupbearer wakes up and says, "Oh, I remember Joseph. Joseph interpreted my dream. He surely can interpret your dream." They go and get Joseph. Joseph's in front of Pharaoh, and this is what goes on. Make sure I got the right verse. Wrong chapter completely. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream. No one can interpret it. But I heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied. "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." This says an awful lot about Joseph. Joseph's been there in prison. He could have gotten angry at God. He could have said, I'm done with this. I've been faithful, and every time I get thrown in the pit and I lose my coat, I'm done. But he doesn't do that. What we learn is Joseph still has a relationship with God. He still gives God the credit. That says an awful lot. How many times have you been in a pit and just given up? Joseph did not. Joseph interprets the dream. That means 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Pretty simple. 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. It's going to be severe, and it's going to happen soon. So you need to prepare. It's going to be severe, and it's going to happen soon. And this is when Joseph becomes the interpreter of dreams, and he steps out, and he is the self-appointed political advisor. He becomes a self-appointed political advisor. He says, "Now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land and take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of the good years that are coming and store them up in grain, or store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine." So Joseph not only interprets the dream, but he gives his own political advice. Now let Pharaoh find somebody that's discerning, that is wise, that can organize this and save the nation. A plan seems really good to Pharaoh. Pharaoh sees that Joseph and God are together. He sees that God is with Joseph. Puts him in charge of the whole land. Takes his ring off and puts it on Joseph's finger. Gives him a coat. Joseph doesn't have good luck with coats. I wonder, was Joseph thinking, maybe I don't want to take this coat? I don't know. Joseph's lost a lot of coats. Gives him gold chain, puts him second in command. Joseph is walking down the road, and there's people in front of him saying, "Make way, move away, Joseph is coming." He's moving on up. He's got it made in the shade. He's got the great life. End of story. He's finally arrived. All of those struggles, he made it through. He earned himself the good life. Now he can sit back and rest. Everything is great. That's what the world would tell you. you fight and you struggle, things start finally to pay off, you can sit back and relax a little bit. Success and blessings, payoff, is not the end of the story. This is only the middle of Joseph's story. Up to this point, the questions have always been, how will Joseph remain faithful under adversity? How will God's plan gain any headway over human failure? These have been the questions to this point. Those questions are part of your lower story also. How are you going to do during adversity? How are you going to remain faithful during adversity? How will God's plan for you gain any headway over your human failure? God's got a plan for you. How will it gain any headway over your human failure? If things change for you and you start seeing things pay off, it's not the end of your story. A great life is not faithful through suffering on the way to success. A great life is faithful through suffering and success. Whatever comes, good or bad, you're faithful. You remain in a relationship with God. The questions now in Joseph's life is, will Joseph's faith remain through his prosperity? Joseph could have just sat back and said, God's never really been there for me. I'm always getting thrown in the pit. I'm second in charge now. I might as well just start following the Egyptians, the Egyptian way. He doesn't do that. He could have done that. He could have lost his faith. Will Joseph be Will Joseph be a faithful steward of God's blessings? In other words, God's blessed him with success. Is Joseph going to be a faithful steward of that? God's blessings, when he blesses you, he doesn't intend those blessings to remain with you. He intends you to use your blessings to bless others. So the question is Joseph going to just use those blessings that he got from God and just keep them to himself? Big payoff. Or are his blessings going to bless others? Keep the blessings to himself or be a blessing to others? That's the big question here. We find the answer in verse 53. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began. Just as Joseph had said, there was a famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all of Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." Imagine that, the Egyptians having to go to a Jew. The Pharaoh telling the Egyptians to go to a Jew to solve their problems. When the famine had spread over the whole land, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was very severe throughout the whole land. And all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe throughout the whole world. Yeah, it's been a long and windy road for Joseph. But God never forgot his promises to Joseph. And Joseph never forgot God. And as a result, the blessing was to the whole world. The whole world was blessed because of what Joseph did, and Joseph saved the grain, his advice, his political advice. The whole world benefited from that. So Joseph did not just keep his blessing to himself, he passed it on. Joseph shows that the key to a great life is your relationship with God. Remain faithful. Remain faithful to God during your success and your suffering. And when you are blessed, you be a blessing to others. That's the key to a great life. God has made promises to you. He's made promises to bless your life. It might not seem like that all the time. You know, in your lower story, your life might not seem all that blessed. But if you remain in a relationship with Him, there's a promise that He's going to use everything to turn it around to right. And when you're blessed, you need to pass that blessing on. Remain true to your calling. You've been called. You know, we have salvation. We have a calling to not hold that salvation just with ourselves. We have a calling to go. Go make disciples. What do? We make more disciples. And then we make better disciples. We make more of them and then we teach them how to be better. Disciples who will in turn love God, love people, and through them we can serve and bless the rest of the world. We are to be a blessing to the world. Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for all that you do for us. Help us to see your plan for us in your life, and your plan for us in life. Help us to understand the things that are going on in our life, in our lower story, in relation to you. In Jesus' name, amen.